Dead End by Rachel Lynch. Read by Clare Kissane. Chapter 1. Ullswater's visitors had packed up for the day, and the lake was still. The water kissed the pebble beaches along her northern shores, and the cars that normally choked the laybys and car parks were gone. The steamers had finished their hourly chugging up and down, and the only onlookers were the bowing trees, gently swaying, until tomorrow, when it would all start again. Hidden away from prying eyes, whatever the time of day, concealed beyond a private driveway, lay an old stately pile, proudly dominant for 200 years. Wasdale Hall, home to the Fitzgeralds since the Doomsday Book, sat in darkness for 2 reasons. 1, the current Earl, Xavier Paulus II, balked at the electricity bills, and 2, his grandson, Zachary, had been out fishing all day. There was ample light, though, from the mid-May sun as it dipped further behind the Helvellyn Range to the west of the lake. In the driveway sat 3 old Land Rovers, one still containing Zachary's kit from his session at Ayr Beck. He'd pulled out a 3-pound beast of a trout that morning, and the kitchen still smelled of cooking. Linda, the housekeeper for almost 30 years, had cooked it the way Grandpa liked it, with plenty of butter and parsley from the herb garden at the rear. Zachary stayed in the kitchen by the Aga, which beat out the only heat in the house, and forked chunks of dog food into 2 feeding bowls. He'd long since pulled off his boots, and his belly was full. Now it was the turn of the dogs, who eyed him greedily. There wasn't a sound. They watched TV rarely, and not even a radio broke the hush, while Grandpa was long for his bed, and Linda had washed up and gone to her home in Watermillock hours ago. Samson and Delilah hovered hungrily, but patiently. They knew their turn would come. The 2 great lumbering dark brown Labradors licked their lips in anticipation. Zachary stood up, and the dogs padded over from their baskets and began to eat. He put the fork in the sink and the tin in the dustbin and watched them gobble their dinner. Fatigue gripped him, and he yawned. There was little more to do, only have a shower and climb into bed. The season was heating up nicely, and there would be plenty more fishing days to come. He knew that as soon as he left the warmth of the kitchen, he would be hit by the icy blast of the rest of the old windy mansion until he jumped beneath his duvet and generated his own heat. Grandpa was adamant. The heating went off on the 31st of March and came back on again on the 1st of November, every year without fail. Zachary lingered a little longer. The kitchen was his favourite room. It was where he talked to Linda and Brian, the gardener, and it was where he could put his feet up on a chair, muddy boots drying by the Aga. It was where he talked about his paintings and the best places to catch perch. It was where he gutted his fish, and it was where he listened. It was also where he preferred to eat. Grandpa ate in the dining room, alone. It had always been so. Zachary preferred to sit with Linda and Brian, not because he didn't love his grandpa. Nothing could be further from the truth. It was simply because Grandpa had certain routines that would never change. He was a creature of habit. Zachary allowed the dogs to finish and let them out to roam around in the garden for the last time before bed. They always stayed close, and he never worried about them wandering off. But tonight, they didn't seem to want to go. Samson whined and looked up at the ceiling, as if he wanted Zachary to take him upstairs. Zachary laughed and stroked the dog. Delilah copied and refused to go out. "Have it your own way, then," he said affectionately. "In your baskets." They reluctantly obeyed and stared up at their master with huge eyes. Zachary almost felt like curling up beside them. He shrugged his shoulders and yawned again, flicking off the lights. No one locked doors around the lake except the tourists, even after last year, when the woman had been found by Watermillock Church. He shivered. As he climbed the stairs, he thought about his grandpa's weakening health. It wasn't that he suffered from a malady or a dangerous infection, more that he was simply old. He was 95 and was beginning to show it. He'd grow weaker by the day, and it pained Zachary to see him like that. He'd always been strong, independent and steady, but now he was frail. There was no one else, and it had been like that for a very long time. Something inside Zachary ached, and it was a familiar feeling. Grandpa was not going to be around forever. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint thud overhead, and he stopped on the bottom stair and looked up to the ceiling. He heard the noise again. The great hallway was freezing, and he felt his way up the grand staircase lit only by the moonlight coming through the window, reflecting off the lake. He could easily find his way in much darker corners. After all, he'd lived all 19 years of his life here. But he still held on to the banister and watched for anything illuminated or out of place. He dismissed the noise and carried on. He paused at the impressive window on the first landing overlooking Ullswater. The lights of the Peaks Bay Hotel could be seen across the lake, and Zachary was thankful for the peace and quiet afforded by their isolation. He imagined couples dancing and friends drinking in the bar until the early hours, and thought that Grandpa must have enjoyed that life a long time ago, but not now. He continued up the stairs, but halfway up he stopped. He thought he'd heard the sound again. This time it concerned him, as it was an unfamiliar noise, and he tried to work out what it was. He listened carefully in case it happened again, but there was nothing. He made a decision to check on Grandpa before he retired to his own bed. He didn't usually do it, but it wouldn't hurt. The noise could have been Grandpa dropping something, or even falling, and he couldn't risk leaving it till the morning. Grandpa might need him. There was a light under Grandpa's study door, and Zachary wondered if he'd fallen asleep at his desk. Maybe the thud he'd heard was his grandfather tumbling from his chair. His steps quickened, and he went to the study door. "Grandpa?" he said, quietly at first. No answer came back. Maybe he'd just forgotten to turn off the light. "Grandpa," he said again, louder this time. Even as he turned the handle, he knew that something wasn't right. A whiff of something in the air, a creaking noise. He swung the door fully open and sank to his knees. The smell of shit stung his nostrils, and Zachary buried his face in his hands and sobbed. Covering his mouth, he crawled towards the middle of the room, where a stool lay knocked over on the floor. Above it, the body of his grandfather swung to and fro. Chapter 2. Kelly jumped from the top of Kalepot Crag into the freezing water below and screamed. She didn't reckon there was anyone else on the planet who'd dare push her over the edge, and as she emerged from the lake below, she squealed at Johnny in mock horror. He laughed out loud and jumped in after her, making his body into a bomb. She wasn't offended when he pretended to be laddish, because she saw straight through it. It was a relief to be with someone who expected nothing from her apart from what they already got. The water would have stopped the heart of someone from a warmer climate, but for Kelly and Johnny, it was luxuriously refreshing. They were alone, because it was May and too cold for tourists to venture here. But the cold bothered neither of them, because they knew that this was the best time to visit, when they both needed to cool off after equally taxing days. They swam towards the middle of the lake, and Johnny caught Kelly's leg. She wriggled, and they both went under the surface. The cold stung her eyes as she searched underwater for him. He'd swum beneath her and grabbed her leg once more. They broke the surface and caught their breath. The water was a deep turquoise, and they could see 15 feet below them. Kelly was a confident swimmer in the lakes, but not in open water. She hated swimming in the sea. Here, only the odd ugly pike lurked beneath, and the experience didn't leave a sticky residue of salt and sand. They swam out further and got used to the temperature. The tensions of the day melted away, and Kelly felt free. "Race!" Johnny shouted. She was as...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?